instead of up.
Yep.
I'm like looking at myself, I'm like, okay, I think that's the way still works.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
I thought I just.
You're gonna have to make sure this is muted in place. Well, I should get it. I won't be able to anymore. All right. So are we all back? Ooh, almost.
Yes.
Almost? If you're almost back, raise your hand. All right. So that officially concludes, with lunch anyway, officially concludes what I call level 1.5, which is not ironically the space between, borders and things like that. So now we're officially on what I consider to be our level 2 information, which should be showing up on the board shortly. And again, the vast majority of the information now is going to be concerned with what in classical Chinese face reading, which is based on yin and yang and the 5 elements, would consider the metal, the facial characteristics corresponding to the metal element. Now, for our purposes, we try to minimize having to know anything about Chinese medicine, but it does help to understand conceptually the source that these traits and attributes kind of spring from and how they manifest. So once again, just to review a little bit about the metal element, or specifically people with a strong metallic reservoir of energy, they tend to have very symmetrical features. In fact, of the 5 elements, they are by definition the most refined in appearance. The metal element also tends to deal with sense of self. So while someone with a strong wood energy can come across as aggressive and outgoing and assertive and oftentimes authoritative and have a kind of charisma that way, metallic people tend to be a little bit on the cooler but just as equally strong metallic are bossy energy. People who have, and again, the primary element that epitomizes the metal element is the nose and then the cheekbones. And the cheekbones specifically deal with exercise of authority. The nose itself tends to relate directly to our sense of self in terms of our self-concept, our self-esteem, our sense of potential. The cheekbones, which are also metallic, tend to represent how we're going to express that in groups or in people, right? So hopefully that'll start to come together. It also has some other interesting aspects to it as well. And I'm gonna try to stick to the manual. There are a few examples that I think in Mr. Fulfer's book that I think would be really, really useful. And if I have time, I'll pull those up during this segment as well. If not, we'll swing back around once we've gotten through as much of the manual as we can, and I'll bring those in. And probably in future versions of this manual, we'll be integrating some of that material as well. But by and large, you can tell a metallic person, by the amount of space between their features. Metallic people, as a rule, have very symmetrical features. They have very refined features. Think of, when you think of a wood person, you could think of very bold features or very bushy figure. It's like they're very prominent, but they're not trimmed. They're like untrimmed hedges, so to speak, right? Whereas metallic people tend to look like everything's just painted on and very, very precise. And precision is a very good word that defines people with a strong, and we all have metal in us. It's just a question of what's the degree and the proportions. They tend to be very regal in their bearing, very refined. A wood person might go like this, and a metal person might go, right? You see the difference in the expression? It's the same gesture, but the energy around it's different, right? They tend to be very sensitive people. And what I mean sensitive is they're very aware of when things aren't right in the environment. And it bothers them a lot, right? They also have a predilection towards aesthetics. And what I mean by that is everything has to look good. Everything has to be beautiful and orderly. Beautiful and orderly. Wood people beautiful is good enough, right? But metal people, beautiful and orderly, right? They tend to like things a certain way, and if you vary from that particular way of doing it, it's off. That makes these people very, very challenging lovers, because there's a specific way they like things done, and if you deviate from the plan, even if it's better, it isn't right. Right? So let's see here. Is there anything in here else that metallic people also tend to be very constrained. And what I mean by constrained is they don't emote loudly. They don't like blast people like wood people. Wood people explode, right? The difference, when a wood person explodes, there's force and magnitude. When a fire person explodes, there's just magnitude. There's no push. It's just all done, and then they're off with it, right? Metal people simmer, and they get and the more angry they get, the colder that anger gets. So these are metal people when they express anger. If they don't actually, you ask a metal person what's wrong, they go nothing. You've all had this experience. What's wrong, honey? Nothing. And then the temperature in a room drops another 10 degrees, right? And when metal people get mad, they cut you off. You're done. That's it. You don't exist anymore, right? So, right? So yeah, and that drives wood people fucking crazy, in case you didn't notice, because wood people like to, when they're angry, they like to engage. Like, let's get this out. Let's fight. Come on. Wood people goes, fuck you. You know, let's see here. So, nose notes, level 2. Diagnostically, we're gonna focus on the nose first, then we're gonna transition into the cheekbones. Diagnostically, the nose is actually a hologram of the spine. Now, I haven't played with this too much clinically, but I think it would be interesting to see how many cases of scoliosis correspond to a crooked nose or an asymmetry in the nasal bone. Okay, the nose is a hologram of your spine. The spine is the primary energy channel, or the yin and yang energy channels that feed the rest of the body. So when you start looking at the spine, and the areas around the spine, what you're looking at is a holographic representation of the level of energy that can come into the body, where the blockages along the spine might or might not be, and where they exit, how much can go out. There's a lot that we can look at, and in the energy classes we're going to be teaching in the future, I've just decided that we're going to do a whole other series of energy classes for people who want to go deep dish into that stuff, but it's not this. Does that make sense? It's often woo-woo land a little bit. So when we look at, and we're going to spend some time looking at what we call the money box, which is the opening and the closing of that spinal area, and how it relates to how you manage energy, which is equivalent to money. Money is a form of energy, and it can be, you can gauge a person's spending and acquisition abilities based on this area of the face as well. Okay. Other metal areas of the body include the shoulders and upper back, the colon and the large intestine, the lungs themselves. The bronchi are directly related to the metal element. The skin, which is an extension of the lungs, believe it or not. Body hair, you might think that, a lot of people think that hair is related to the wood element. It's actually not. It's actually related to the metal element. Okay. The cheekbones and upper cheeks, and then and the last bullet here is actually not a metal point, but because it falls into the geography of the cheek, it's an earth area. We call it the lower cheeks. In Lillian's system, they would call them the money bag area. Okay. And that's an earth associated point. Okay. So nasal architecture, you have the bridge of the nose. Okay. Top and bottom, you have the length, the width, how fleshy or bony the area is. How far out from the body does it extend? You have the base of the nose, which is also known as the ala nasi, and then you have the nostrils themselves. Each of these components will tell us things about that person, okay? Psycho-emotionally, the metal element is related to the emotions of grief and sadness. On a more positive or transformational level, the emotion of gratitude is the emotion that heals metal elements or metal issues. So the more you have somebody suffering from a lot of grief and loss in their life, the more you can get them focused on things they're grateful for and feeling that gratitude for those things, the more of a healing, transformational, alchemical effect you will have on lung-related issues, okay? Again, the metal element also determines ego strength, boundaries, and self-esteem. So you can see that there's a lot of things that emanate from the metal element. And a strong metal element can be a very powerful force to deal with. It can also be a very challenging force to deal with. So it has to be balanced. Self-worth and the feeling of lack or plenty are also related to the metal element, okay? So when we talk about the bridge of the nose, this area right up in here, the top of this area is related to the spleen. In the Chinese medical model did not have a pancreas. If you look at the records and all the treatises on Chinese medicine, you will not find a mention of a pancreas because they collapsed the concept of pancreas, the organ or gland of the pancreas, in with the organ of the spleen energy system. So when people are talking about spleen energy, we're also talking about the pancreas. You have to ask them. I don't know, but that's functionally how it works. So when you hear me talking about the spleen, I'm also tending to talk about blood sugar issues as well, okay? The pancreas can be seen at the lower portion of that bridge. So the upper part here is where we start to see spleen issues. And then if they start to travel down, we're looking at pancreas issues, blood sugar, irregularities, things of that nature, okay? If you have long lines extending from the liver area, which is up in here, down through and around this area, this is where we get a lot of questions on the last face reading class. When the lines extend down around this curve into this area, you're looking at energies that are dealing with the spleen and the pancreas, which is usually worry and overthinking. Worry and overthinking, okay? These are the issues that directly affect blood sugar and the spleen energy system. If there's a color in this area, it could indicate a color change or different change in coloration from the rest of the surrounding area. It can indicate an organic dysfunction. Now, this class will not be talking about colorations. Okay, that's more of a Chinese health diagnostic process. We will be doing classes on that, but that is not why we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about today. Okay. So let's talk about the money box once again. Let me see if I can I'll pull up my buddy here. This is Joe. Joe, well, we're going to play with this a little bit, but so when we look at the area here, can you guys see my cursor moving? So we have the bridge of the nose here. This area here is what we call, this whole area is called the money box. This whole area is called the money box. The top, and it's like a funnel. The top of the funnel tells us how much energy / money can go in. The bottom of the funnel tells us how much energy can go out. Ideally, we would like this area and this area to, at the very least, be equal. Ideally, or my preference would be for this area to be larger and this area to be smaller. Okay, why? I want more coming in than is going out so I can accumulate. The problem with metallic people is, especially with this particular idea, is that they can spend a lot. Why? Because things need to be just so. Now, it doesn't mean they don't like a bargain.
We'll talk about when we get to nostrils, we'll talk about bargain hunters, right? But ideally, we would like more energy. We would like to hold on to energy. But here again, we have to be careful because people think more energy is good. More energy is not good unless it's regulated and it flows smoothly and freely. If you don't have smooth energy regulation and you have too much energy, you have illness. You're going to have problems. So it's always more important to regulate the energy you have and to keep it moving than it is to try and acquire more. And again, dipshit here, because I must have had a very narrow forehead when I was younger, didn't believe that in the books, right? I thought more energy was better. Well, I had a younger body, I could handle more energy, right? Now, those things become problematic as you get older because the emphasis isn't on cleaning the system to keep things flowing smoothly. And so we build and we build and we build and we get more and more toxic, we get more and more stagnant, and shit happens. So we'll bring Jack back later. So the bridge of the nose was believed to represent how much energy or money a person could accumulate or lose over time. The relative width of the bridge of the nose, let's go back to Jack here, tells you how much can come in. Now, Jack here has a pretty good money nose, doesn't he? Right? As opposed to Jack's twin brother, Jack. Right? This guy's going to spend his life away. Right? Right? Base of the nose indicates how much money can be saved or lost. Now, bigger, wider equals more energy. It can come in, smaller, narrower, not so much, right? This person with a smaller, narrower nose has a tendency to be able to save more. They tend to be a little bit more discriminating in what they purchase. Sometimes they actually spend more trying to save money because they're consummate bargain hunters. What's wrong, Teresa? Okay. Once again, the size and dimensions of the feature dictate the degree of strength that the element has, or that the attribute has. Bigger, stronger, more defined and beautiful the nose, the more the metal element expresses itself. Smaller noses equals smaller level of the trait, and in some cases, the opposite. Large noses. Chinese medicine theorizes that people with large noses evolved as a survival characteristic for nomadic tribes. Specifically, when people have these large, and especially these long noses, the theory behind this is that they developed a longer nasal tube to warm cold air as it passed through into the body. And so many times you will see that people from these colder climates have much longer, more aquiline noses than people from tropical environments who tend to have a little bit of a flatter nose, a little bit more broad nose, a little bit shorter. They don't need that long nasal tube because the air is usually warm, okay? And that does affect spending and approaches to things of that nature. So this is a large nose. Large nose, large sense of self, large sense of deservingness as opposed to entitlement, large ego, large, 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 large. You can equate large with strong, okay? And I can show you I can pull up some large noses on Jack later. People with large noses often have strong egos and ego needs, okay? And what I mean by that is not only many times do they have a strong personality, but they like to have a lot of praise as well. They like to talk about their achievements and let you know all the amazing things they've done and why you should be impressed with them, things of that nature. So they sometimes come across as rather pompous in some cases, right? Because their favorite subject, as is everybody else, is themselves. But these people are achievers. They're just gonna move through the world as like a force of nature, doing whatever they want to do, right? So many times you will see people who are very successful in the business world have very, very strong, very, very powerful noses, right? They're very ambitious people, very ambitious, right? And they feel like they deserve to have success as opposed to being entitled to it, right? Deservingness says, I want that and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it because I deserve to have it. Entitlement says, I don't have that. The universe gypped me. You have it, so you should give it to me. That's entitlement, right? Large noses are usually a sign of a strong sense of self and personal power. Subjects with large noses tend to use their power in a drive to make the world a better place. So these people actually have a sense of mission that goes beyond them. They want to have an impact in the world, right? Look at Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs didn't have a very large nose from in a meaty sense, but he had a very metallic, very long nose. He wanted to change the world, right? So people with these, and especially in relation to the rest of the face, that have a large nose, they want to have an impact. They want something that's going to outlast them. Does that make sense? Right? So when you talk to these people, appeal to that sense of making a mark in the world, kind of a thing, like you matter, because that's really what drives them a lot. Metal energy people tend to focus on ideals over things, and again, because this particular nose is one of the primary metal features, you're going to find a lot of times that not only do these people do well in business, they also are very ideal driven. They'll fund causes that they believe in, right? Social justice or Greenpeace or whatever that is, right? Let's see here. Yeah. They love to be recognized. I think I covered that already. And again, they're not going to have a small ego. I've never seen anybody with a large nose who was a shrinking violet. They're not always the smartest cookies in the jar, but they don't give a shit. They're going to go and do what they think is right anyway. Interestingly, because the lungs are related to the metal element, when people, and remember, there were some other areas we talked about in terms of the metallic element. You have the nose, of course, you have the cheekbones, you have the upper back and shoulders, upper neck and shoulders, you have the lungs. When people are feeling good about themselves and their metal energy is strong, the lungs will inflate like balloons, and they'll kind of put on this big-chested kind of a strut, right? Because the lungs are inflated, they stand up straight, so it goes right to posture. Conversely, because the element of metal is also related to sense of self, when we're feeling depressed or less than, the balloons of the lungs will deflate. And the shoulders will roll forward because there's no air, right? Small noses. That's a little kitty nose. Right? People with small noses tend to have less confidence. They have more of a desire to play. So think of someone with a very large nose. They're having fun, but they're driven. Like they have a mission, right? People with small noses, they want to kick back, have some fun, play a little bit more fiery, right? They tend to want to blend in too. And the more, and if you've got people on this team with these small noses, the more play-like you can make the work, the better off and happier they're going to be, right?
That's what we like your class.
I hope so.
Are they less curious?
Are they less curious? I don't think so. I don't think they're any less curious. I think they just don't want to take things quite as serious. They're not as comfortable with seriousness. And again, when you look at fire, the physiognomy of fire, you'll notice that everything's pointy, right? And they're very flighty. They're very creative. They don't like to be fenced in or locked in, right? And so you see a little, and fiery people tend to be small. They tend to be very small in stature, right? But they're all over the place, right? They're morning people. I hate those. Right? They have a tended desire. Again, you're going to see, once again, the nose relates to self, right? So here's a direct analog. Nose that sticks out from the face, desire to stand out in a crowd. Nose that's smaller, blends in with the face, desire to blend in with the crowd. To use an old Chinese metaphor or proverb that was actually more negative, the nail that sticks up the most gets hammered down first, right? Well, big-nosed people are the nail, right? But they're usually a lot harder to nail down than the rest of the people, right? So you see this again, this direct correlation between the size of the proboscis and the desire to stand out. And we'll cover that even more in depth actually shortly. The size of the proboscis, the nose. The big long word, I should just say nose, right? Damn it, you told me you wouldn't use jargon. I lied. Anyway, they tend to prefer an easier lifestyle. These small-nosed people tend to prefer an easier lifestyle. Why? It's easier to blend in with an easy lifestyle. Because they follow the herd. They follow the herd. They just want what everybody else has. They don't want something, they all think they want something more, but when it comes to actually taking the action to get it, no, they'll do what everybody else does. They'll see where everybody else is and they stop. Right? They often long for the glory days of old when life was less rushed and people were friendlier, and they do not embrace change quite as quickly as large people. Large-nosed people change the world. Small-nosed people just want the world to stay the way it was with what's familiar. You understand? Right? We all have those experiences when we hear a song on the radio and we remember what it was like cruising around at 16, listening to that song on the radio. Then you hear your kids' music, like, what the fuck is that? That's not music. Right? Unless you're a big nose person, then you're out there big dancing with everybody else. Right? They tend to enjoy group activities or to be part of a family or the group. So once again, if you have people with these small noses, put them in an occupation or an activity that they're part of a group and they feel part of a group and they'll be happy. Okay? They tend to make very loyal employees. Okay? Why? Because they don't have ambition to go beyond it. They're cogs in a wheel. And that's not a bad thing. It really isn't. For those of us who have ambition and who have a big nose, it's always a bad thing. Right? But that's just a perspective. Longer noses, once again, often go hand in hand with a big nose, but not always. So now we're looking at the length of the nose itself, not just the overall size, the fleshiness, how much broad space does it take? You know, how broad is it up here versus how broad here? Now we're looking at just the length. Long-nosed people tend to have a lone wolf or a loner mentality. We tend to call this a pioneer's, it borders on what we call a pioneer's nose. These people tend to just want to make their own way in the world. They don't really want to be part of a group, although they don't really mind if people want to follow them. They're just not going to worry about it, right? They're happy going to the movies by themselves. They're happy going places they would go because they want to go there, right? If you want to come along, fine, but I'm going, bye, right? They're not going to beg you to, they won't stay home if you don't want to go, right? These people tend to have a very subtle but very strong drive to succeed despite the obstacles. So again, they're very relentless people. They follow their nose and their nose extends out from the face. And that's one of the things that, once again, the further that nose extends from the flat plane of the face outward, the more pioneering they become, right? The more of this, I'm going to go and chart uncharted territories and do my own thing and follow my own beat of my own drum and those captain my own ship. They're also ambitious, as you can probably have guessed, because it goes along with a big nose. They have a willingness to work hard to achieve their goals. If they decide, this is a great entrepreneur's nose, right? If they decide that this is what they want, it's not work anymore. Even though they may be busting their back. I was going to use the lower part of my anatomy to describe that, but I figured, we have a G audience. But they're going to, if they see something, if they have an idea for a book or a business, get out of the way, right? They're not going to be easily deterred. And they feel a strong sense of accomplishment when they do these things, right? Like this manual that it's 132-page manual. I did in 3 days. My medal was all over the place when that came out. It's like, hallelujah! I felt so good about it. I can't stop talking about this fucking manual, right? Even though I know it's rough in a lot of places, but I felt good about myself. My medal was happy. I had Pinocchio nose. Okay. Variations on the long nose or the large nose include the extended or elongated nose. This is often known as the trailblazer or pioneer nose. If you see someone with this nose, get out of their fucking way. Okay, these are people who are they're going to go into uncharted territory. They're going to figure it out. and they're going to succeed. They're relentless. And again, if you look at how far that nose extends from the flat plane of the face. The bump in the nose relates to this willingness to be told what to do. People are to desire to be in charge. So people with a bump in their nose, whether it's obvious or not, have a strong desire to be the boss. That's why this is an entrepreneur's nose. This is not a nose that you want for an employee who's going to be playing, and especially one that's got to be like micromanaged or has to have somebody over the, that in a job description that needs somebody looking over their shoulder a lot. They're not going to do well. They're going to be very resentful, right? But if you give this person a job where they have huge amounts of autonomy, the ability to do things the way they think is the most appropriate way, they're going to do better. But they're still going to want to be in charge. Okay, so these people make great entrepreneurs. They make great self-starters. These people tend to always be looking for the better way to do something. Okay, they dislike routine. They don't like to follow the herd. Right? You go to you get one of these people in with a small nosed person, and the pioneer goes up. Why are you doing that? Well, we've done it that way for 20 years. Why? Why don't you just do it like this, this, and this? Well, because we've never done it that way. Exactly. Right? That's exactly, again, the whole idea of new and better. Right? Not always the case, though. Sometimes newer is not better. Right? They tend to be progressives. Okay? Flatter noses. Now, look again, if we look at this nose, very aquiline, but doesn't extend nearly as far from the face, especially up in here, right? So flatter nosed people, as you can probably guess, are on the opposite end of the continuum. They're not people who want to stand out. They don't want the attention. They like attention in certain contexts, but not as a way of separating them from the herd. The big nosed people want to separate themselves from the pack. Right? Because they know if you're not the lead dog, the view is always the same. Well, people with this kind of nose don't mind looking at another person's butt for extended periods of time, metaphorically speaking. These people I call them the traditionalists. These are my terms. They tend to be very cooperative. They're very group oriented. They're more socialistic, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're more about what's good for the group. Right? What does the society want? What is a good community? They belong to people who tend to be content with the life they have. They're not going to upset the status quo. Large-nosed people, status quo isn't good enough. Something's got to change, right? They're slower to grasp innovation. They prefer the old-fashioned way to the newer ways of doing things, okay? They don't do change well, right? They tend to be more conforming, much less adventurous. They're very self-conscious people. And what that means is, like, if they're in a group, they don't want to be singled out. They want to blend in. Just like the smaller nose variety. Again, you can see the parallels with this. Small nose, desire to blend in. Flatter nose, it's an analog of small, desire to blend in or not be singled out. Okay. They do tend to be cooperative because they like to be part of a group, right? They have this trouble wrapping their heads around dangerous stuff that involves risk to life, money, reputation, social status. They, when they see people doing these provocative and dangerous things, they're like, why are you doing that? Right? They can't understand why somebody would want to go do that. Why did you climb Mount Everest? Because it was there. Huh? Right? Why did you invest all of your money in this business that you didn't know would take off? Because I thought it was a good idea. Really? Right? It's a kind of conservative risk management and overly risk managed type of life. Now, what's interesting is these people can often enjoy other people's stuff vicariously. As long as it doesn't involve them, they can kind of, like, if they're watching something on TV, they can, like, be thrilled for that person, even though they know they would never do that. I would never do that, but that was exciting, right? So they prefer achievements that come from team efforts. So once again, these people are all, you know, if you can say this, if let's go team, these people are going to be more on board. Whereas if you go to somebody with the pioneer's nose, they go team, they go, fuck you. Right? What's this going to do for me? Let me show you how I'm going to run this team. Right? Flat nose or fleshy nose. And I'll pull up some fleshy noses on Jack. This one's from Lillian's book. So now we're talking about this nose could be long, it could be short, it could be broad, but whatever it is, it's got a lot of flesh to it. And a lot of times when you see, fleshy is almost the opposite of aquiline. Aquiline is a very refined, delicate, almost beveled and sanded and smooth kind of an energy, whereas fleshy is like somebody took a big lump of clay, roughly nose-shaped, and plopped it on your face, right? Big fleshy nose. These people have a little bit more earth in them, okay? And earth is the mother of metal, okay? We call this the money nose. And anytime we're talking about earth, we're talking about money, okay? It's a sign of materialism. These are people who love their stuff. They love their creature comforts, like their food, their drink, their plushy, fluffy toilet seats, you know. It indicates the ability to appreciate and accumulate stuff, right? And they tend to derive pleasure from having their things all around them. Like earth people, their favorite place to be is in their chair, and everything they need is in reach, right? You see this in the nose. And they accumulate, and again, these are other examples of the bulbous nose, which is even more grandiose than the fleshy nose, okay? These people with these really fleshy noses, taken to extreme, they have a tendency towards overindulgence. These are people who are going to consume excessive quantities of food or drink. They're going to pamper themselves a little more than most people would find comfortable, right? They like to live hedonistically. The bigger and more bulbous the nose, the tendency towards that hedonistic side, right? You're actually not that bad, John. I've seen worse. The narrow, thin nose, as you can probably extrapolate, and that's kind of the reason why I gave you the heuristics at the beginning of the class, is because trying to memorize all of the nuances of these noses, it can be a lot, but if you understand the basic outliers, the parameters, you know, large versus small, wide versus narrow, and the continuum that they're on, you can look at somebody's nose and derive based on those heuristics what that nose probably means, and that makes you functional fast, right? So these people tend to value money or ideals over money. So the thinner, narrower nose, they're not about stuff. So you see once again that continuum: flesh, broad, stuff. Things that you can, you know, material world, material girl kind of a thing. Narrower, thinner, ideals, things that are intangible. The way the world should be, right? Versus the way the world is, right? They tend to value ideals over money. They tend to value ideals over things, right? These are also, now again, my politically incorrect humor. These are the people who say, you've got a lot, let's give some of your shit to them. And they don't bother asking. Why? Because it's an ideal. The people who have more should automatically donate to the people who don't have it because they don't have it, and you do.
Doesn't matter if you're working for
It doesn't matter because it's an ideal, right? And of course, there's people who say, I worked hard for my money, why should I give it to you? That also is an ideal, right? And all ideals are bullshit, even mine. All ideals are belief systems that people have, and all belief systems are made up. All belief systems are based on a decision you made about the way the world is or should be, based on the information you had and the feelings in your body at the time. They're all bullshit. All of them. Every belief system that anybody espouses is bullshit. It's something somebody made up that they like.
And if it works for them, they should keep it. But if that belief system doesn't work, then maybe they should think about changing it. You don't have to believe anything I say, just do what I tell you, right? And validate or invalidate the results based on that. But that's the whole thing we need to understand is all beliefs, and this is David's ideal. All belief systems are bullshit, even mine. But do they work for you? Do they produce in your life the results that you're looking for? If they are, indulged, keep them, right? If they don't, think about maybe changing them and how you might do that, okay? But people with these long, thin noses, or instead of narrow noses, very aquiline, very streamlined, these people are idealists. And they're adamant, they're fucking maniacal many times about the way the world should be. They're not practical oriented people in general. They're very strong ideals and they will cling to those ideals, okay? To the point where, let's cover this part real quick. They care more about the quality of the beauty of the things they have rather than how much of it they have. They would rather have one or two really beautiful pieces than a whole collection of things of that nature. You understand? They'd rather have one or two really beautiful, elegant pieces of clothing than a whole closet full of stuff that's good enough. Does that make sense? And that relates here also to this concept here. If it ain't right, it's wrong. Right? There's no such thing as close. Okay? They would rather have exactly what they want rather than manage with something temporarily that's not quite up to standards. They'd rather do without. Literally my way or the highway. Right? If they can't have exactly what they want, they don't want anything. Okay? And again, these are tendencies. They're not set in stone. I say them a lot like they're absolutes. Remember, I'm talking about these being tendencies. And we've all had these moments when our metal got up and we got all idealistic and shit, right? The bony nose, contrast this with our fleshy nose. Now remember, flesh was like someone took a big lump of clay and right on our face. The bony nose has very little skin. And the skin itself is very tight. Teresa has a nice aquiline, somewhat bony nose. She's got a bony nose, right? Lillian has a bit of a bony nose. Giano has actually a bit of a short nose, but he has actually a pretty good money funnel, which is why he can afford my shit, which I appreciate about Giano. Right? But the bony nose people, these people tend to, believe it or not, they eschew material things and would rather live simply and in some cases aesthetically. Now, you guys aren't super bony. You're actually kind of on the bony side.
Yeah, I've had injuries too.
Okay. They often value a lifestyle based on their values and their ideals, more so than, or in extreme cases, they embrace that whole monastic side of things. So this is the yoga person who goes to every yoga retreat, has a certain diet. I mean, these people embrace that I don't want to use this word, almost cultish kind of devotion to a lifestyle, right? She comes to every hypnosis training I've seen. That's devotion to a lifestyle.
I was thinking that.
I know you were. Right? And then again, it could be again, when we talk about cults, remember that cults in society have evolved from the Mooney, Hare Krishna kinds of people to what we call the concept of micro cults. They're very intelligent. You can have financial cults, you can have sex cults, you can have self-help cults. But they're micro, they're very modular as opposed to the big organizations that used to be out there. All of your MLMs are textbook cult indoctrination, right? But they're financial based, right? So look at the noses in those, especially at the people at the top versus the people at the bottom. They work extremely hard, but they don't just do it for the money. They do it because they care more about the ideals and the causes that that money serves. Right? They're very, very ideal driven. Again, I'm not putting ideals down at all. Ideals are a great concept. But at the end of the day, it's the law of the jungle, not the rule of society. So we have to find that happy place. Bridges of the nose. Wide bridge of the nose. Here we see a nice, very, very thick bridge. This nose is actually quite short if you look at in terms of the face, but it's the bridge itself is very, very thick. Obvious person has some obvious spleen or blood sugar issues because there's some discoloration here, as well as some signs of overthinking or worry. But here we got blood sugar issues, so some kind of dysregulation in the blood sugar system is probably going on there. But this person has a very wide nose. Indicates a very strong spine. The broader and thicker that the bridge of that nose is, the stronger the backs these people tend to have, right? I don't think I've seen any grapplers, any successful grapplers with a thin bridge of their nose. Grapplers, people who do like jujitsu or wrestling or those kinds of, that involve a lot of moving heavy objects around. I've yet to see one with a thin bridge of the nose that was successful or didn't have a lot of injuries, right? There are some people who are just feel compelled to compete in those arenas, and physiologically, they're just not cut out for it. And so they get a lot of injuries because their body's not built for that, right? But they have an ideal, they have a belief, right? When they write checks their body can't cash, right? They tend to have a lot of strength and stamina. This is a Jing thing, man. These people have very, very strong spines. They can do a lot of shit physically, right? They can work harder, right? They tend to make money in large amounts because they work hard, right? The person literally has extra energy for making money, okay? And money, because they're willing to work, it tends to come in larger quantities. This is, again, goes back to that whole money funnel concept. Bigger end of the funnel, money can come in easier, but it can also come in larger amounts. And that's an important distinction to make. People with a small bridge can also make money, but it comes in smaller increments. You understand the difference? You can still make money and accumulate wealth if you have a smaller top of your funnel, but it comes in smaller increments. You know, someone with a big nose may pull in $1,000, a unit, whereas a person with a smaller nose may only be bringing in, $100 a unit. So they have to work 10 times as hard or 10 times longer to accumulate that same amount, but they can still do it, okay? Narrow bridge, again, more delicate spine. Again, if you've got a very narrow bridge of your nose and you're like to do MMA stuff, oh, I hope you're fighting people with other narrow bridge noses, because that's all I got to say. Right? They tend to have less energy for manual labor. These are not people who are constitutionally designed, unless they've got other features that buffer that, like a very strong jaw, very pronounced brow ridge or something like that. These are not people who are designed for manual, hard physical labor, okay? These are people who are designed for mental work, problem solving, book work, accounting, research. These are very, very cerebral. I don't want to say cerebral, but they excel better at mental tasks because they just don't have the physical support system to do a lot of manual labor or physical stuff. Now, that doesn't mean if you decide to go to the gym, marshal up your willpower and start lifting weights and doing squats, that you won't get a bigger bridge of your nose. Nothing you have is stuck. Everything can change. It's just a question of how long it takes, okay? Let's see here. And again, they tend to accumulate energy in smaller units, smaller increments, right? And again, this one, bumps in the bridge of the nose. We talked about this a little bit. There's two ways these bumps manifest. It's either an obvious bump or it's one that you only feel when you palpate the nose. People who have an obvious bump want to be in charge. They like to be the boss, and they're very overt about it, okay? People with a bump that is hidden or camouflaged, but you can feel that when you palpate, they secretly want to be in charge. They secretly want to be in charge. So these people, when you get them in a group and they're not the boss, they may slowly try to usurp other people's responsibilities, or they may creatively interpret what they think the person leading the group actually meant. Subtle ways of taking over, right? And one of the things that they're doing here a lot of times is they're testing the boundaries of the person in charge to see how much they can get away with, right? And if the person who is in charge has a better nose than them, they're going to get slapped, especially if they got cheekbones. Okay. These people tend to also have a higher degree of pride. They tend to do better as the leader of a group. In fact, they tend to rise to the occasion as a leader of the group than they do as an Indian. You'll get better performance from these people if you put them in charge of the group than as part of a team member. It's just, it goes to their sense of self. They think, I'm the leader, I've got to show these people how it's done, I've got to be the example. They rise. They're part of an Indian, they're part of the cluster, they're not separated from the crowd, they have a better idea of how things should be run. That may get passive aggressive, right? May or may not, right? But they have an inner drive to take over or to be the boss. People with upturned noses. These are some good ones. If the nose slopes and then turns upward, the subject is more of a follower than such a nose would indicate. In other words, we would tend to think that if the nose is extending further out from the body, that these people want to be more pioneering. But because of the upturn of the nose, the energy comes back. And so these people tend to be more like the smaller nosed variety. In fact, people with this kind of nose often have a smaller nose, but it has a little upturn to it, right? These people tend to blend in more. They want to be part of the group. The work of this individual pays off because the energy down is said to come back to the person later. Nostrils. Are we good with noses so far? Okay. Shall we jump into nostrils or? Okay, because you guys a chance to break up and do this, or we can do nostrils. We'll do nostrils. We'll do the whole nose, just get the money box out of the way, right? So wide nostrils. Now, nostrils themselves govern how much energy, or i.e. money, can flow out. And depending on the shape and the size of the nostril will determine the spending behaviors that people engage in, okay? So people with wide nostrils, obviously, indicate a person who can spend large amounts of energy and money in large amounts. Easy come, easy go. Now, if this part is small and this part is big, watch out, okay? Especially if you're in a relationship with these people, don't give them access to your bank account, right? Especially if they've got a hook in their nose or a sloped forehead, right? These people tend to be a little bit more on the cunning side. So they they'll spend your money extremely well, and then, anyway, easy come, easy go. Large noses. They can spend money and energy in large amounts at one time. So if the person's got a big nose, small nostrils, they may accumulate money, they may hold on to their money, and they'll spend it wisely. Person with a big nose, big nostrils, 100 grand for that condo, here you go, right? Whereas someone with a much smaller nose might say, well, can we break that up into payments? Right? Narrow nostrils. Narrow nostrils are people who value their money a little bit more. They still spend, but they're looking for the best deal. So they're very discriminating in how they spend their money. Lillian, when she was buying some of our tickets, she found a way to combine discounts and webinar specials in a way that pissed us off, but she pulled it off because she was shrewd that way, right? She got a better deal than we were offering because she knew how to do things based on what our backroom offers were versus what our webinar offers were, right? We fixed that. Thank you, Lillian. So now if we try to pull it off, it won't work. Why? Because of her. Anyway. But it's people like that who actually find the loopholes in our systems, right? And then we can fix them. Let's see here. They tend to buy large quantities of stuff at a discount. This is where they often spend more money in the effort to save money, right? They know, like if they go to Costco, they know that in a year's time, they can only use so much toilet paper. But the deal is buy one, get one half off. They only need one, right? But they'll buy two. Even though they're never going to need it for another year, they'll spend the extra money to get another year's worth of stuff when they only had to spend enough for one because they only needed one. You see, a lot of people do this. This is why in that lust to save, to get the biggest buck, they often spend more than they have to because they don't use the excess, right? Or by the time they get around to using it, it goes bad, right? My wife is this way. Oh my God, she will spend $1 to save a dime. This is crazy. But in terms of energy and money, they look at different circumstances to determine if the energy, the money required spending it pays off later. They will use their energy and money to make the payment. So if they know in the long run there's going to be a positive return, they're more willing to do it. So they're more long-term thinkers. They're very strategic in what they do. Okay. They're always looking for bargains. They're looking to buy things on sale. And they're people who are focused more on the value that they invest, as opposed to people who just want it fucking now. They want the convenience of it. Just give it to me. I don't care. It's $10 more. Did I get it now? Give it to me. I'm not proud. Arrogant maybe, but I'm not proud. Right? Okay. Small nostrils indicate a person who likes to hold on to their money, right? They don't like to spend any money at any time, okay? Does not mean they're cheap, by the way, but they do remember every time they reach into that wallet to pull out a buck or to whip out that credit card, they remember every hour of toil and trouble and blood and sweat and tears that went into earning the money they're about to give away. And so it makes them very, very hesitant to just part with it for a frivolous reason, right? They tend to evaluate how much things cost before they spend, but they spend well. That's one of the things, because they know how hard they work for it. Whenever people would come to me, and this was especially true, my wife she grew up in communist China. They did not have a lot of money. They were in near poverty conditions most of the time. So she is very, very, very conscious of every penny. Every penny. You can feel the agony. And yet she loves value. She's very metallic. Me, I see something I want. How much is it? Can I get it now? Here. My wife goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "We'll make more money." "Well, that's so expensive." I said, "I'll just make more money." That's literally what I say. That's the mantra. I'll just make more money. And I do, for some mysterious reason, right? Because it's a flow and it's energy. And as long as energy is flowing, it's growing, right? As long as you continue to cultivate the things that allow energy to come in, then it will. When you spend, you should spend in ways that you know are going to come back to you, right? But that's just my attitude, because a lot of people think there's not enough money. There's more money now in the world than there's ever been. Bandler says this, he says it real well. Remember, once upon a time, there was no money. And now look how much there is.
And different kinds.
And different kinds, right? We live in an abundant universe. If you're willing to go after it, if you're willing to become the person for whom that abundance can flow to. And sometimes, in order to get that abundance to flow to you, you have to flow to it, which means you have to invest, you have to sow in order to reap, right? And some people they're just polarized in that way. They don't want it. They want something for nothing, and that's human nature, by the way. Me, I just learned through trial and error, because I'm supposed to have had a narrow forehead, that the more discomfort you create for yourself, the more rapid the growth. And that's especially true in the realm of finances. Okay. But again, remember, you can always make more. There's no limit, in spite of what people might want you to believe. There's no limit. The only limit is in you here, right? They don't let go of it easily. Okay. Flared nostrils. I actually have a whole, in my little forensic software thing, I have a whole section of flared nostrils. It's kind of fun. But these people always look like they're snorting fire. Right? It's like, I don't think you can see it from there. Like, I can make my nostrils flare. Right? That was a little game my sister and I used to play. What body parts can you wiggle? Never mind. Right? So these people tend to have a little bit of an enhanced ability to smell. They're much more sensitive to scent. They also have an increased need for buying things that have an aesthetic value. In other words, they like beautiful stuff. They like things that smell nice, that taste nice, that look nice. They're very, very attuned to beauty. Okay? Much more so than the other noses. The alanase, I have the sides of the nose. This again goes to the money box. If you have very firm, very well-defined, the nostrils are the holes, the ali are the little fleshy parts, okay? And they govern spending and saving behaviors. Just the last part here. These people have really good taste and they tend not to spend money on things that are not beautiful. So for these people, packaging matters. Right? They will go to a 5-star restaurant and they will be they will judge how good the food is based on how pretty it is on the plate. Okay? Me, I just stuff it in my eating hole when I'm done. And then I ask for the next round. So alanase govern spending and saving behaviors. The firm, well-defined ally, see, these are very, very smooth. They're very obvious. It's not perfectly symmetrical. But it is very, very defined. It's very metallic. As opposed to some nostrils, our nasal ali, I'll show you later, are actually quite misshapen. They're very asymmetrical, right? These people tend to be very disciplined with money. They tend to be able to hold on to it very well, and they're good at saving. People with a less defined, there's Jack's back. Less defined. You notice it's not quite as uniform here, right? It's not symmetrical, right? These people are a little bit more sloppy, lazy in terms of their personal routines, their finances. They don't monitor things quite as closely. So they don't have that discipline that somebody with a very defined ally is going to demonstrate. Okay, more laissez-faire, I guess is a good way of saying it, to use terms. People with a very flat, now, some of our ally, they'll stick further out from the face. A lot of them will be more flat, almost like gorilla type flat, right? Maybe I can show you some flatter ally. Like here, that's a little extreme. But you can start to see how these kind of pare down. Right? Now, what's obvious about, y'all laugh, what's obvious about this? That nose doesn't fit that face, does it? Right? If you see something like this on a human being, pay really close attention, because now the traits are amplified. Okay, and so this is what I talk about. A nose should be in harmony with the face. Is this in harmony with the face? No.
Small.
It's too small. No.
No? See? So again, is that more in harmony with that face?
Yeah.
You can feel it, can't you? Right? It just blends. So be very, very aware of that something's not right there. Okay? Again, another example of a very flat ally. These people tend to be very undisciplined, both personally and financially. Again, at the risk of sounding judgmental or biased, which is kind of a human thing, you see a lot of these people in the boxing gym. They're the ones who are the nickel and dime prize fighters. They don't have the discipline to get to the big ring, so to speak. Again, I'm giving a horrible generalization, but these are people that tend to be a little bit more undisciplined. They talk big, they don't deliver. They make good grunts, but don't expect them to change the world many times, right? Their spending they're not disciplined with their money, they're not disciplined with their finance, with their lifestyles, those kinds of things. Cheekbones, okay. I think let's play with noses. So that's going to cover the nose and the money box concept. So again, we're looking at top of the money funnel is the bridge of the nose. How wide is it? The length of the nose, is it very fleshy? Is it very bony? Is it long? Is it short? Is there a bone or is there a bump in it? Right? Are the nostrils large? Are they narrow? Are they small? Are they big? Right? Are the sides of the nose, how well defined are they? Are they fleshy? Are they symmetrical? These are all things, again, if you look at this yin-yang continuum that we started with, you can start to extrapolate both ends, and you can start to derive meanings from that. Any questions before we jump into our breakout? Okay, then it is 4:30. Let's take 45 minutes for this, right? And follow your nose. You guys on YouTube, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. Post your comments, share it and like it.